of these redactions are. And we're not even talking about the fact that there were still about 3 million documents, which may be as many as 25 to 50 million pages that are being hidden right now by the DOJ, which I believe are the most devastating.
Yeah, it's really horrifying. And, if Raskin was able to see that with his limited time in there, just imagine if he actually had full access to see everything for an unlimited amount of time. These documents are not difficult to parse through, but they take time. And I've been spending so much time digging through the publicly available ones. And if I were just given, a couple hours and a few computers with time constraints, I don't know how I would even be able to do that job. But the fact is, everything we've been fed from this Department of Justice has been a lie. There have been so many inconsistencies. This entire investigation going back to Trump's first term and far before that things just don't add up. I mean, you see these FBI documents where they say that
seen could be. The United States was founded on the idea that ordinary people could reject the unacceptable excesses of poor leadership, band together to demand better of their government, and create a nation that would be an example for the world. And this year, as we celebrate 250 years since America declared our independence from tyranny, I can think of no better place to speak to you as we reflect on the current state of our union. Tonight, as we watched our nation's lawmakers gather for a joint session of Congress, we did not hear the truth from our president. So let's be, is the president working to make life more affordable for you and your family? Is the president working to keep Americans safe both at home and abroad? Is the president working? Dear, I traveled to every corner of Virginia. His reckless trade policies have forced American families to pay more than $1,700 each in tariff costs. Small businesses have suffered, farmers have suffered, some losing entire markets. So the Supreme Court struck these tariffs down 4 days ago. The damage to us, the American people, has already been done. Meanwhile, the president is planning for new tariffs, another massive tax hike on you and your family. And Republicans in Congress, they remain unwilling to assert their constitutional authority to stop him. They're making your life harder. They're making your life more expensive. They're even making it more difficult to see a doctor. Rural health clinics in Virginia by the president and Republicans in Congress. And tonight, the president celebrated this law, the one threatening rural hospitals, stripping healthcare from millions of Americans and driving up costs in energy and housing, all while cutting food programs for hungry kids. But here in Virginia, I am working. And it's not just me. Democrats across the country are laser focused on affordability in our nation's capital and in state capitals and communities across America. To know that their leaders are focused on addressing the problems that keep them up at night. Problems that dictate where you live, whether you can afford to start a business or whether you have to skip a prescription in order to buy groceries. So I'll ask again, is the president working to make life? Is no. I grew up in a house of service. My mother was a nurse and my father was a career law enforcement officer. I began my career by following in my father's footsteps as a federal agent, working money laundering and narcotics cases. I worked and making arrests. It's about building detained American citizens and people who aspire to be Americans. And they have done it without a warrant. They have ripped nursing mothers away from their babies far off detention centers. And they have killed American citizens in our streets. And they have done it all with their faces masked from accountability. Every minute spent sowing fear is a minute not spent investigating murders, crimes against children, or the criminals defrauding seniors of their life savings. Our president told us tonight that we are safer because these agents arrest mothers and detain children. Think about that. Our broken immigration system is something to be fixed, not an excuse for unaccountable agents to terrorize our communities. After working in law enforcement, I continued my career of service as a CIA officer, working undercover to protect the United States and our allies from global threats, terrorism, nuclear weapons, and the aggression of adversarial nations around the globe. But as the president spoke of his perceived successes tonight, he continues to cede economic power and technological strength to Russia, bow down to China, bow down to a Russian dictator, and make plans for war with Iran. Here's the truth. Over the last year, through DOGE, mass firings, and the appointment of deeply unserious people to our nation's most serious positions, our president has endangered the long and storied history of the United States of America being a force for good. So I'll ask again, is the president working to keep Americans safe, both at home and abroad? We all know the answer is no. In his speech tonight, the president did what he always does. He lied, he scapegoated, and he distracted. And he offered no real solutions to our nation's pressing challenges, so many of which he is actively against neighbor. And sometimes he succeeds. And so you have to ask, who benefits from his rhetoric, his policies, his actions, the short list of laws he's pushed through this Republican Congress? Somebody must. The scale of the corruption is unprecedented. There's the cover-up of the Epstein files, the crypto scams, cozying up to foreign princes for airplanes and billionaires for ballrooms, putting his name and face on buildings all over our nation's capital. This is not what our founders envisioned, not by a long shot. So I'll ask again, is the president working for you? We all know the answer is no. But here's the special thing about America. On our 250th anniversary, we know better than any nation what is possible when ordinary citizens, like those who once dreamed for government, we see it in the determination of students organizing school walkouts all across the country, whose voices are becoming so powerful that the governor of Dakota standing up for their communities, from peacefully protesting in sub-zero temperatures to carpooling children to school, so that their immigrant parents are not ripped away from them in the parking lot. As a mother of 3 school-age daughters, I am inspired by their bravery, but I am sickened that it is necessary. And Americans across the country are taking action. They are going to the ballot box to reject this chaos. With their votes, they are writing a new story, a more hopeful story. In November, I won my election by 15 points. And we won 13 new seats in our state legislature. Our campaign earned votes from Democrats, Republicans, independents, and everyone in between, because they knew as citizens they could demand more, that they could vote for what they believe matters, and that they didn't need to be constrained by a party or political affiliation. This is happening across the country. New Jersey elected Mikey Sherrill as governor in a double-digit victory. Democrats flipped state legislative seats in places like Georgia, Iowa, Mississippi, and Texas. The list goes on and on. Are stepping up to run in the spirit of our forefathers. They are running to demand more and to did the seemingly impossible, flipping 41 seats in Congress. In my case, I was the first Democrat elected in 50 years, swinging our district 17 points. Those who are stepping up now to run will win in November because Americans, you at home,
intelligent.
No, you can demand more, and that we are. In his farewell address, George Washington warned us about the possibility of, quote, cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men rising to power. But he also encouraged us, all Americans, to unite in a common cause, to move this nation forward. That is our charge once more, and that is what we are seeing across the country. It is deeply American and patriotic to do so, and it is how we ensure that the state of our union remains strong, not just this year, but for the next 250 years as well, because we, the people, have the power to make change, the power to stand up for what is right, the power to demand more of our nation. May God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia, and may God bless the United States of America.
Miracle.com/Midas, code Midas at checkout. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. Let's go, Chef. Miracle Made, that they've been sponsoring us for since we started the podcast. Definitely check those out. I love my Miracle Made sheets.
For the Working Families Party response to the President's State of the Union. The Working Families Party is the political party for working people, not the bosses, not the big dollars. I'm proud to be a part of a movement that is built for and by the people. Is authoritarianism. Any response that doesn't acknowledge that truth, he's gaslighting us. He wants working families that were better off under his regime. But we know the truth. Our country is in crisis. For millions of Americans, affordability is out of reach. Trump has driven up the unemployment in South America. And at home, ICE agents are hunting down human beings and cities are under siege. The FBI is raiding election offices in Georgia. The environmental protections we earned after a generation are being stripped away. Educators are facing attacks on public and higher education because diversity and truth threaten corporate power. Workers are facing union busting and retaliation. And the Republican-led Congress, it's abdicated its post as a co-equal branch and yielded itself to the oligarchs in the White House. Trump bragged about his tariffs, but they were never about creating jobs. They were a tool for Trump to bully countries or companies into paying fealty to him personally, and about making working people pay the price for his tax cuts for billionaires. The courts have blocked his illegal actions, but for too many small businesses and consumers, the damage is done. He played up his tax cuts, but forgot to mention that it's $1 trillion giveaway to the wealthiest and well-connected. He talked a big game about banning stock trading is dire. We can't afford to believe Trump's lies, and we have to pay attention to his actions. This is not a normal time, and our response to it can't be politics as usual. For the ability to make rent or the chance to own a home. For goodness, working people feel it every single day. We certainly feel it where I come from in Western Pennsylvania, where I was born, raised, and now represent in Congress. I know what it's like to come from a working class background, to be burdened by student debt, and to witness our communities be neglected time and again. I ran for office because I wanted to make hard against me, and still we won. Lost it. We're still workers carry the pride of generations in their hands, and we're restaurant cooks start before sunrise and don't sit down again until midnight. And where childcare workers do some of the hardest work in America and still struggle to pay the rent. We have world-class hospitals, yet people can't access the care they need. Insurance companies drive families into bankruptcy. Parents work 2 jobs and still can't afford childcare. Patients ration medicine just to make it to the end of the month. No matter how hard we work, we continue to struggle. That's the real state of our union. This is not an accident. Trump is failing all of us, but he is not failing everybody. Trump promised to lower our costs. Instead, he gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% while cutting. He promised us public safety, but we have an FBI director who's focused on flying on private jets to concerts and hockey games using our tax dollars. Trump promised accountability and transparency, but his DOJ is violating our subpoena, protecting pedophiles and burying documents that
made by top-notch chefs I've watched on TV. Plus, there are literally dozens of diet filters and cuisines, and all my cravings are delivered right to my door. Today, you can get 50% off your first week. Sign up and thank me later.
You were the person who's debating with nobody. You're just on state regime media talking about an issue that Americans actually aren't debating. Overwhelmingly, this was a great show. And you're missing the opportunity, intentionally, to talk about a cover of a child sex trafficking ring and Americans getting screwed by this Trump regime because you're intentionally engaged in a cultural issue, frankly, against your own people in your district in order to distract from all of the things that people are really going through. What a very big opportunity lost. And then you have the audacity to mention the contributions of undocumented people while your Fuhrer is rounding up migrants, undocumented and documented, and stripping away people with TPS documentation and throwing them into concentration camps, and might I add, not giving them habeas corpus petition rights? Interesting, right? That Ghislaine Maxwell invoking habeas corpus petitions after being found guilty of sex trafficking, and actual human beings who have habeas corpus rights getting lost in the system as they rot in concentration camps like Dilley and Delaney and other ones throughout this country. Interesting how that works, huh? All of that's going on. Turning to international news for a second, you had Donald Trump earlier today attacking Canada and saying that China will be taking away Canada's Stanley Cups, and they're taking away the right to play ice hockey. That's what they call it in Canada. We like to play our ice hockey in Canada. Trump is posting here that Canada won't let a new bridge open. Let me just read what he said. As everyone knows, the country of Canada has treated the United States very unfairly for decades. No one knows that. Now things are turning around and fast. But imagine, Canada is building a massive bridge between Ontario and Michigan. They own both, the Canada and United States side, and of course, built it with virtually no U.S. content. Barack Hussein Obama stupidly gave them a waiver so they could get around the Buy American Act and not use any American products, including our steel. Now the Canadian government expects me, as President of the United States, to permit them to just take advantage of America. What does the United States of America get? Absolutely nothing. Ontario will even put U.S. spirits, beverages, and other alcoholic products on their shelves. They are absolutely prohibited from doing so. Now, on top of everything, Prime Minister Carney wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. We will just get the leftovers. I don't think so. The first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada and permanently eliminate the Stanley Cup. The tariffs Canada charged their dairy products have for many years been unacceptable, putting our farmers at great financial risk. I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them. And also importantly, Canada treats the United States with the fairness and respect we deserve. We will start negotiations immediately. With all that we have given them, we should own perhaps at least 1/2 of this asset. The revenues generated because of the U.S. market will be astronomical. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He's a predator. He is a predator just like Putin. And these are the Putin tactics right here. And as Josh Wingrove says, it's difficult to boil down the bridge socket discussed for years by officials and lawmakers of every major party in both countries, in part to make sure the continent's top trade corridor wasn't beholden to a single privately owned bridge. The U.S. would have split the cost. Canada fronted and is going to be repaid by tolls. Named for Gordie Howe, hockey legend, and Canadian-born Detroit Red Wing star, as a big nod, as you can imagine, to the country's joint history. And now, here's what Donald Trump is doing. These are the Putin tactics that we discussed. Now, speaking about the Putin tactics, I did a whole video on this earlier this morning, where as part of what was going on in the United that should be noted because it was an intentional FU to the Ukrainians, because they said they wouldn't have discussions with the Ukrainians unless the Ukrainians dressed up, and then Witkoff wore like a jumpsuit, and Kushner wore like a regular like sweater or whatever. And that's just he's got a deep thing. Yeah, it looks like he's like one of the Sopranos, like character. Like it looks like a Soprano. No undershirt. No undershirt, like a Soprano gold chain. Like what the hell are we even doing here? And what was really going down here when Zelensky uncovered is that this was part of the plan between Putin and Trump to get Ukraine to fully surrender. The U.S. demanded that regardless of any ceasefire, that Ukraine agree to new elections and agree to a referendum of turning over Ukraine to Russia in May or June the latest. And Zelensky has said, if you want me to do a referendum, there needs to be at least a 30-day or 60-day ceasefire. How can we do elections if our people are getting killed? And Putin has refused anything, not even a 30-day ceasefire to allow elections, right? And so what Putin did do at UAE is through this guy, Kirill Dmitriev, who runs the sovereign wealth fund in Russia. He was the guy who met with Witkoff and Kushner in Miami, along with Ushakov, before, right when the U.S. started talking about making Landry, the governor of Louisiana, the envoy to Greenland, and started talking about annexing Greenland. That happened when you had Dmitriev in Miami meeting with the U.S. individuals. So then Dmitriev proposed what's being called the Dmitriev package, $12 trillion of Russia to Donald Trump. Russia's entire annual GDP is $2 trillion. So Russia's told the U.S., we'll give you $12 trillion, but you got to have these elections in Ukraine by May. We're not going to agree to a ceasefire. And the U.S. is delaying, saying that we don't have the resources to give PAC-3 missiles, which are the new missiles that go into the Patriot system, the air defense that Ukraine has. The issue is when you get this U.S. military here, you have to rely on U.S. for maintenance and further equipment once you buy it. So if you buy the F-35s, you have to rely on the U.S. Department of Defense for repairs and maintenance and parts, which is why countries like Canada are like, why would we buy F-35s now? And Denmark's regretting buying F-35s because if you buy the F-35s, you're going to be beholden to the U.S. for the life cycle of these planes. And if Trump wants to extort you, he can just say, I'm not giving you the parts. That's what's happening, in my opinion, in Ukraine right now, while they try to force it. By the way, is this getting reported on anywhere else other than the Biden stuff? Like, you would think this is a pretty big deal, right? That there's this $12 trillion big deal taking place, and the U.S. is trying to force the surrender on Ukraine. It just doesn't get any attention anywhere. And I find, I speak when I speak with Senator Bernie Sanders about this a lot, that the most important issues are often the ones that are least discussed. And I know front and center on American minds right now is AI and data centers. That's one of the top issues. You know, obviously healthcare, being able to afford homes, affordability generally. But this issue of AI and data centers destroying jobs is a massive issue that Americans are horribly fearful of. And it doesn't exactly help people's fears when you have people like Donald Trump's National Economic Advisor, Kevin Hassett, go on TV and say basically, well, it is what it is. There's job creation's gonna lag, but what can you do? Watch Hassett earlier today. Let's play this clip.
The open question really is, what's going to happen to jobs as productivity goes up? And I think that there's a chance that job creation lags, productivity skyrockets, profits skyrocket, GDP skyrocket, but then all of a sudden, like you're making 20 widgets and you make 20 widgets with if you're a person, and then that person has to find a new job. I think that kind of transition could happen.
Here's Hassett again.
The other thing is that there's a pretty big decline in the labor force because illegals leave the country. And so the break-even job number is quite a bit lower than it was under Joe Biden when there were people, basically coming across the border willy-nilly. And so I think that you should expect slightly smaller job numbers that are consistent with high GDP growth right now. And that one shouldn't panic if you see explosive numbers that are lower than you're used to, because again, population growth is going down and productivity growth is skyrocketing. It's an unusual set of circumstances.
And let's see, majority are non-college educated white voters and non-college educated voters who form the backbone of Trump's base. Are they buying this?
If you know anything about Donald Trump, you know that he built his 2 presidential victories on winning voters without a college degree. Well, Donald Trump's base with non-college voters is absolutely collapsing. What are we talking about here? Well, why don't we just take a look? Voters without a college degree on Donald Trump. Look at this. Back in 2024, he won those voters over Kamala Harris by 14 points. You come over to this side of the screen. What's his net approval rating with him? He is underwater by 9 points. That's a 23-point switcheroo with his base of non-college voters. He is absolutely collapsing with a group of voters that helped put him into the White House.
I'll just show you one more on the economy. How do people view Trump on the economy? Let's play this.
Staggering. You know, the economy used to be the wind beneath Donald Trump's presidency wings, and now it's a Titanic. Because what are we talking about here? Well, let's just take a look here. Trump's economic net approval 1 year in term 1. Hey, yeah, plus I ledger, plus 8 points. It was his best issue, arguably. But now it's one of his worst. Look at that. Way down in the basement, 18 points below water. What is that, John? Quickly submit. What is that, a 26-point switcheroo in the wrong direction? This is the type of number that Democratic midterm dreams are made of in Republican.
Brett, Jory, arrogant and so silly.
Before Brett gives like a student, I just want to, I like him. I'm going to use the G word. He's the goat, man. That guy cracks me up, dude. What a talking. I mean, I love the whole show. I like people at least predicting this thing. You like it's their job. It's a stick. And he likes his job. And I just respect the hell out of that. Sorry, Brett, go.
And he's committed, I'm gonna say this. I'm not sure I agree with you, but you're entitled to your opinion. But he's certainly committed to that shtick. He knows that there's a lane for that shtick.
There's a total lane, and he's feeling it. he's definitely committed to it. But you see, I think one of the things that you'll see in tying, all these various topics together is that Donald Trump is constantly trying to protect those people in the Epstein class, whether it's, from crimes that they may have committed or whether it's from any sort of economic effects. He's trying to preserve their wealth, he's trying to grow their wealth, he's trying to make sure that they're as rich as possible. And he really doesn't care what regular people are going through. He doesn't care if regular people are getting hurt by AI data centers and the water extraction that's a result of that, or the power that's being used and the bills that are increasing because of that. He doesn't care at all, as long as Kevin Hassett said there with a smile, productivity is going up, even though all these people are losing their jobs. Isn't that it's a great thing, kind of unusual, right? But isn't that fantastic? They are bragging about it. And what you see Donald Trump doing is he is just doing things constantly to enrich those people in the Epstein class, to enrich the billionaire class, at the expense of the people who were previously, as Harry Hinton was saying, those non-college educated Trump voters, and just Americans in general, kind of working class Americans. And we see this especially as a result of clean energy. This is like one of the kind of clearest examples that exist there, because already, as of this moment right now, Donald Trump has already canceled or delayed enough projects that would account for power for more than 13 million homes across the United States. And this is while everyone's bills are skyrocketing. You could tell me right now, I'll look in the comments, are your electricity bills up or are they down? Because I'm seeing already people are saying that your electricity bills are up and are going way up. And I've heard this from so many people. So why would Donald Trump cancel 335 clean energy projects, delay them, strip them of funding, if those projects could actually help bring these bills down? Well, it's because Trump is deliberately blocking them or slowing these federal approvals or piling on red tape to get in the way of these projects, to block these projects, while he's making it easier for companies, for oil, gas, and coal companies to operate. Do you guys see the new Trump administration mascot? And this is beyond parody. In fact, I think I saw it on a parody on late night shows. And when I saw this, I thought this was a joke at first. But they made a mascot named Coley. And I have a picture up of Coley right here to make coal accessible and make coal seem great and cool for all the American people, to push coal on people. I'm showing this image of Coley, where they're spreading this little cartoon coal image They put in pictures with other people in the Trump administration. But it's very clear what they're doing. They're blocking all of this kind of clean energy policy, all these various projects that would actually bring down the cost of goods for people and help people. And in many cases, the jobs that come from these projects are actually primarily in red states in so many cases. But Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He'd rather enrich the oil and gas industry than actually help people lower prices. Also, he could just destroy clean energy. And it's all a part of this kind of protection racket that we've been seeing across all of these various topics that we've been speaking about today.
Coley is something you would hear like at a South Park episode. And it's like, it is so, the whole thing, man. I think I went a little too far in the last second calling Harry Epton the GOAT. And maybe he's not the GOAT, but he's definitely having a moment. So let me I want that back. The South Park character was Cowley. I know. Yeah. Okay. This is a real post from Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum. Mine, baby, mine. Donald Trump made it a top priority for the Interior to unleash big, beautiful coal, leading the charge. Learn more about how we're advancing Trump's American energy dominance with our new spokesperson, Coley. Mine, baby, mine. Mine, baby, mine.
By the way, I'm just about 100% sure too they made this image with AI. Just
Make image of me and coal, you know. I mean, this is so ridiculous things, but this is, as we said, this is what the Epstein class does. This is what these predators do. These are horrible people. These are horrible, evil people who behave that way. And I hope one of the themes that you see in this episode is that there's really not a lot of things that I said, which is I'm like, this is why you need to vote Democrat. Right? This is why you need to vote for the Democrat candidate over the Republican candidate. I just want you to take all this information, okay, and I want you to take a step back, and I truly want you to reflect on everything that we just shared. I want you to draw your own. It's not for me, frankly, to tell you, and I'm very resistant to even having the role. That's why you need to vote this person or that person. That's why I don't like reporting on like the primary. This person's beating this person, this person. It's just not really exciting. That's not what interests me about the show or about teaching, about what I do. What interests me is taking all this information out there, simplifying it, showing you the themes, and then allowing you to make these decisions feeling empowered. That's what the show to me is about more than anything else. So let's do that. You have the information, share it. Share it, and with Colby, share it with Colby. Colby's the most ridiculous thing ever. I want to thank everybody for watching. We're grateful for you. Make sure you hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. Subscribe on audio and video. Leave a 5-star review on audio. Join, become a member of this YouTube channel. That's one of the main ways we grow. We appreciate you all so much. And let's get to 6 million. Jordy, take it away. Shout out to the -90. Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Roger Olkowski, every episode of our podcast, and more exclusive content locally available at MidasPlus.com. Fanatics Sportsbook, every bet feels rewarded. Use FanDash to boost, bet, and have the cost of the Fanatics World. Earn up to 10% FanDash on your bet. Sign up today. Our local tax expert will do your taxes for $150 all in. They know your situation from self-employment to W-2s. They pay $150 to get your taxes done by a local expert.
Thanks, Joel, for joining us this hour. Really happy to have you here this President's Day. Happy President's Day. The first U.S. president to live in the White House was the second US president was John Adams. John Adams moved into the White House in November of the year 1800. Before that, while he was president, but before he moved into the White House, before the White House was complete, John Adams lived in Philly. Both John Adams, the nation's second president, and George Washington, the nation's first president, they both lived in Philadelphia in the 1790s while the US Capitol and the White House were being built in DC. And that house in Philadelphia, where both George Washington and John Adams lived while they each served as president. That house has a really interesting story. Accidentally, the last remaining walls of that house were, by accident, torn down in the 1950s. That was the last standing portion of the house was accidentally demolished in the 1950s. Decades later, once archaeologists and historians figured out for sure where that president's house had been, the city got involved, they bought the land, they preserved everything they could, and ultimately that site was reopened as a national historic site. Today it is sort of an open-air pavilion where you can see the shape of the president's house. You can see the foundations of the original building. They've got artifacts there from the time that George Washington and John Adams lived in that house. And while John Adams was from Massachusetts, while Adams was not a slaveholder, George Washington was. George Washington had 8 people who were enslaved to him, who he brought from Virginia to that house in Philadelphia to serve him while he was president. He later brought an additional enslaved person from Virginia to Philadelphia to that house, making it a total of 9. And that is all part of the history there at this historic site in Philadelphia. Now, you probably heard about the fact that over this past year, President Donald Trump ordered the physical removal of all references to slaves and slavery at that National Historic Site. Well, today, a big change in that case. Today, Pennsylvania ordered that the Trump administration must put those references to slaves and slavery back up. The judge in the case is a Republican appointee from the George W. Bush administration, and she starts her remarkable ruling today with a quote from 1984 from George Orwell. She then says, quote, "As if the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 now existed with its motto, ignorance is strength. This court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to disassemble and disassemble historic truths when it has some domain over historical facts. It does not." Honestly, this is your President's Day present this year. This ruling, let me give you a little bit more from it. The President's House, meaning that site in Philadelphia, represents the city of Philadelphia fulfilling an obligation to tell the truth, the whole complicated truth. Removal of the crucial interpretive materials there strips that site of that truth and deprives the public of educational opportunities designed to be free and accessible. The abrupt elimination of historically significant educational material on the site is like pulling pages out of a history book with a razor. Each person who visits the President's house in Philadelphia and does not learn of the realities of founding era slavery receives a false account of this country's history. Worse yet, the judge says, worse yet, the potential of having the exhibits replaced by an alternative script, a plausible assumption at this time, would be an even more permanent rejection of the site's historical integrity. It would be, quote, irreparable. The city has met its burden to establish irreparable harm. The defendants, the Trump administration, for their part, raise only one argument for why an injunction in this case would be inequitable. They argue that there's a public interest in upholding the federal government's right to convey its preferred speech. Restoration of the President's house in Philadelphia does not infringe upon the government's free speech, nor is the government prevented from conveying whatever message it wants to send by wiping away the history of the greatest founding fathers' management of persons he held in bondage. President Washington's house would not merit designation as a historic site if Washington had not commanded the army that won the Revolutionary War. His presence presiding over the Constitutional Convention graced it with the gravitas and spirit necessary to the creation of our government's foundational document. Washington's restraint and modesty radiated strength and wisdom that defines the ideal chief executive to this day. The government can convey a different message without restraint elsewhere if it so pleases, but it cannot do so to the president's house. Not until it follows the law and consults with the city. The motion for preliminary injunction will be granted. Happy President's Day, Philadelphia. You are getting your history put back up by court order at the president's house. A lot of stuff is happening all at once this week. I think it's kind of just an accident of the calendar, but it's all happening all in a very quick series of days this week. Today's President's Day. Tomorrow is Lunar New Year. The year of the fire horse begins with this Lunar New Year. Ramadan starts tomorrow as well. Also this week is Ash Wednesday, which is the start of Lent in the Christian calendar, which is the period leading up to Christianity's holiest day, which is Easter. I will also note, and this isn't a religious observance, it's a civil observance in the United States. But this week also happens to be when we have Remembrance Day for the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. Over 125,000 people locked up in prison camps in this country during World War II. American citizens and non-citizens alike locked up purely on the basis of their race. It was an executive order from President Roosevelt that enabled that to happen. That executive order was signed by FDR on February 19th, 1942. And so February 19th every year is Remembrance Day for that wildly unconstitutional and unwise decision to lock up whole families, to lock up men, women, children, elderly people, babies, lock them all up, all without trial for years in mass prison camps purely because of their race. That's all of that. Remembrance Day and all those other holidays and observances are all this week. And the last two things I mentioned there, Remembrance Day for Japanese American incarceration in World War II and Ash Wednesday on the Christian calendar, those two things are sort of coming together this week in a way that I think is going to be a pretty big deal in the Chicago area. It's going to happen this Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, this week. The cardinal who leads the Archdiocese of Chicago, Cardinal Blaise Cupich, is this week on Wednesday going to lead an outdoor mass in Melrose Park, Illinois. They are expecting literally thousands of people to attend. And this service is specifically to basically stand up with both feet and to have the Catholic Church in America say, our church is a church of immigrants. It is a stand with immigrants observation. It's going to be Wednesday evening, interestingly. It's going to culminate in a procession through the streets. Again, thousands of people are expected. But a couple things to know about this. I mean, first of all, this is just a couple of miles from the immigrant prison, the ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois. And second, a federal judge has just ruled that Catholic clergy must be allowed into that ICE facility to offer Holy Communion, to offer ashes for Ash Wednesday to people who are locked up there by the Trump administration. ICE has just been ordered they need to let in the Catholic clergy to provide religious services to the people locked up there by court order, and they need to do it by Wednesday. Is the Trump administration going to allow that to happen? At that very same facility at Broadview, for years, nuns and priests have been allowed in there to hold mass, to minister to the people who are locked up there. They've been allowed to do that for more than a decade before this past fall in September. The Trump administration put a stop to it. You might remember our footage that we aired here on this show, the dramatic footage of the Catholics' Eucharistic procession to Broadview in October this year, just right after the Trump administration started turning away the Catholic clergy, blocking them from providing religious services, even though they'd previously been allowed in there to do that for more than a decade. I love how the Trump administration Republicans like to crow about how they're all for religious freedom. They're the ones who turned away the nuns and the priests in Broadview after letting them in there for a decade. It was the Trump administration that turned them back. Well, now this week, a judge has ruled that those nuns and priests must be allowed back in. And so on that day, on the day they must be let in, on Wednesday this week, day after tomorrow, there's gonna be a cardinal and several thousand Catholics and immigrant families and supporters of immigrants from all over Chicagoland, all in the streets, celebrating a huge outdoor mass, marking one of the holiest days of the year in the Christian calendar, and making what is effectively a big physical show of moral force on the side of immigrants, a peaceful moral confrontation with this government, with what they're doing with these attacks on immigrants and with their prison slaves. So again, I think that's gonna be a big deal. That is Wednesday this week. And while that's gonna happen in a couple of days, there's also just a ton of news to report about other confrontations, sort of this type, other confrontations, other opposition that's being stood up against Trump right now, and how those things are starting to pay off all over the country. So let's start tonight in Hutchins, Texas, which is just outside Dallas. Hutchins, Texas is one of the places where they've been trying to put a huge new Trump prison camp. Well, tonight, Hutchins has its regularly scheduled city council meeting. Local news stations in the Dallas area were planning to send camera crews and reporters to this city council meeting in Hutchins because they were expecting another fiery night of protest, anger, and emotional opposition to this prison camp that Trump was trying to put up in this Texas town. You might remember our previous coverage of how up in arms everybody was in this town in Texas, saying they did not want one of these prison camps there. Well, today, in advance of the city council meeting tonight, the company that owns the warehouse in Hutchins that ICE was going to buy to turn into a prison camp, that company announced that they will not sell that warehouse to the Trump administration so the Trump administration can turn it into a prison camp. They won't sell. The Hutchins mayor telling the Dallas Morning News, quote, "God answered our prayers." The mayor, in a statement, thanked the company for deciding they wouldn't sell their property to ICE. He said, quote, "We look forward to working with this company to find a tenant that is a good fit for the city of Hutchins." The mayor also, in a statement to WIA, the local ABC station, he thanked everybody in his town. He thanked everybody in Hutchins who protested and spoke out and said they wouldn't stand for this prison camp. He said, quote, "Your concerns did not go unnoticed, and your professional decorum shown during our city council meetings, as well as the protest here at City Hall, is much appreciated." Thank you for protesting me here at City Hall. I agree with you. It helps to have you protest here. Thank you. The mayor of Hutchins, Texas, kind of showing how it's done in terms of respecting the First Amendment. Local opposition, though, in Hutchins has stopped a Trump prison camp from being built in that Texas town. People who were against it, the whole town was against it, they stopped it. Same thing just happened in Kansas City, Missouri. For the past few weeks, we've been covering local opposition in Kansas City, people there protesting, turning out to local meetings, pressuring people every way they can, people saying, "We will not stand for a Trump prison camp being built in Kansas City." The local press, including the Kansas City Star, showing, documenting in detail the incredible pressure being brought to bear, not just against the Trump administration, but against the local company that stood to profit from selling this Kansas City facility to the Trump administration so they could turn it into a prison camp. We had Kansas City's mayor, Quinton Lucas, here on the show, talking about how he and Kansas City would do everything in their power to stop the prison camp from being built in their city. Well, now they have won that fight as well. Hutchins, Texas won, Kansas City, Missouri has just won. The local company that was going to do the sale of that facility in Kansas City decided after all, they are not going to do it. The mayor says that is good news, and they're not letting down their guard. He credits all the local opposition for having stopped that sale. He says now it's Kansas City's job to make sure that Trump can't find anywhere else in their town to try it anywhere else.
Need better internet? Cox Internet has the fast, reliable speeds you're looking for. Get Cox 300 meg internet with a 2-year plan price lock guarantee, plus equipment included. Switch today. Taxes and fees excluded from price guarantee.
We're seeing stories like this pay off all over the country. In New Jersey, this is a low-profile story, but it's the same dynamic. New Jersey, local opposition, concerted local pressure led to a New Jersey company saying it would turn down a contract to build out vans for ICE, vans for transporting their prisoners. In Delaware, we've also just learned that a company that contracts with ICE, a company called Daedalus Aviation, they will not be taking airplane hangar space at Wilmington Airport in Delaware. This is a company that makes their money from ICE. Local residents and Democratic lawmakers have pushed hard, saying a company like that shouldn't be allowed to do business in our airport. Now, amid that pressure, that aviation company is pulling out. This comes after Delaware activists also played a key role in pressuring Avelo Airlines to stop its deportation flights for ICE or be kicked out of the Wilmington Airport if they wouldn't. After that pressure in Delaware and around the country, that company Avelo has since stopped flying deportation flights for ICE. This was today in New Jersey, in Roxbury, New Jersey. Hundreds and hundreds of people standing outside in the cold along Route 10. According to local press, people lined both sides of the road for about half a mile. There are hundreds of people there today, all protesting against a planned Trump prison camp in their town of Roxbury. One local councilman from a nearby town who was among the protesters today in Roxbury, New Jersey Insider reported that he told the crowd in this protest that someday he expects his grandchildren will ask him what he did in this era to try to stop ICE from terrorizing immigrants. He told the crowd he wants to at least be able to tell his grandkids that he spoke out. This was El Paso, Texas this weekend. They were protesting, calling for all of the ICE prisons to be shut down, including especially the ones in Texas. They're also specifically calling for no new ones to be built. El Paso is another place in Texas where Trump is trying to build yet another of his big black site prison camps. There's a local company, or not a local company, but a real estate company called Flint Development, that Oklahoma City actually talked out of doing a deal with ICE in Oklahoma City to put a prison camp in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City county and city government got involved to talk Flint Development out of it in Oklahoma. But that same company, Flint Development, owns another property in El Paso. So now it is El Paso that is trying to stop Flint Development from selling their El Paso facility to ICE. That fight is ongoing, and people were out in numbers, in great numbers in El Paso this weekend protesting against it and saying there should be no new Trump prison camp in their town. The news outlet The Lever notes that Flint Development has both recently stripped information about its executive team from its website. It's funny. It's a real sure sign that you're doing work you're proud of, right? When you try to make sure that nobody knows you're doing it because you can't come up with a way to defend what you're doing. So you try to do it anonymously. In Orange County, Florida, county commissioners say this week they're going to bring up a resolution in opposition to the plans to build a big Trump prison camp in East Orlando, Florida. In Baltimore County, Maryland, the Baltimore County Council is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow night to try to stop what they fear is going to be a new ICE facility in Baltimore County, Maryland as well. And look, this is actually just from tonight, within the last couple of hours. This is Hertford County Board of Commissioners meeting in Winton, North Carolina. This is tonight. Winton, North Carolina is apparently another place where they want to put yet another Trump prison camp. Even though that item was not formally on the agenda at this Board of Commissioners meeting in North Carolina, local folks packed the meeting tonight anyway to speak out against it. Just got this footage in the last few minutes. But we're really seeing this everywhere. From Texas to North Carolina, Oklahoma, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Mississippi, Oregon, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Maryland, Georgia, everywhere we can follow this story. In every single place Trump is trying it, there is, across the board, nonpartisan opposition to any of these Trump prison camps being built anywhere. You're seeing opposition and action against it from Republicans, from Democrats, from independents, from politically engaged people, from people who clearly have no politics at all. Just everywhere, literally everywhere that he is trying it, the American people are saying, no, they do not want this. They do not want a Trump prison camp in their town. And I mean, honestly, whatever you think about Donald Trump and the Trump administration, is there anyone among us who contends that this is the guy, this is the president, this is the sane, sober, measured leader to whom the American people want to entrust a multi-billion-dollar string of new, absolutely massive black site prison camps, specifically to hold civilians in huge numbers indefinitely without trial? Is that the kind of tool we want to give to this president in particular, in his infinite wisdom, in his restraint and modesty? How do you think a president like him will use such a tool? So we've got a lot of things to watch on that story this week. A lot of places fighting a lot of battles on that front right now as we speak. And I do think this week looks like it's going to be a crucial week. I think that Wednesday night in Chicago may be a very big deal. But again, we're seeing it everywhere. I mean, this was yesterday, Concord, New Hampshire. Yet another protest against yet another planned Trump prison camp, one that is slated for the southern New Hampshire town of Merrimack. I gotta say, that Merrimack Trump prison camp plan has turned into an absolute debacle for the Republican governor of New Hampshire. She has refused to say, there's a great one, she has refused to say whether she is for or against that prison camp in her state. The whole state is rising up against it. Merrimack is absolutely up on its hind legs, totally against it. And Governor Abbott keeps trying to say that she doesn't have a position either way. And her way to try and get around this is to repeatedly say she just doesn't understand what's happening. She can't figure it out. She feels like she's out of the loop. It's an incredibly weak performance from a governor who's otherwise ambitious and has designs on national office. We're going to have an update in just a few minutes from New Hampshire on how Trump's effort to force one of his prison camps into southern New Hampshire is just turning into a political disaster for that otherwise ambitious Republican governor in that state. We're also going to get an update this hour from one of the journalists who's been arrested by the Trump administration, is now facing federal charges just for reporting on a protest against ICE. Georgia Ford is going to be arraigned in Minnesota in that case tomorrow. She's going to be here live with us tonight. This was Jacksonville, Florida today. A protest to support efforts to ban Trump's federal agents from hiding their faces with masks. This was a big event in North Carolina this weekend. Protesters led by the Reverend William Barber marched 50 miles from Wilson, North Carolina to Raleigh. They arrived Saturday in Raleigh. Several thousand people at this came out in Raleigh to support them. This was Batavia, New York this weekend, a march to the ICE detention facility, the immigrant prison there in Batavia, including a large and very solemn protest where they held in silence for 39 minutes to commemorate 39 people who have lost their lives in confrontation with ICE and CBP or in custody of ICE and CBP in the past year. This was Belvedere, Illinois this weekend, an anti-Trump, anti-ICE protest there. Another protest here in Mishawaka, Indiana. Another protest here in South Sioux City, Nebraska. Another protest here in Minneapolis at Jackson Square Park, where they want people to know that the immigration surge has not ended on the ground there. Another protest here in Concord, California. Another protest here in Mount Kisco, New York. This was Springfield, Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. The community of Springfield coming out in force to demand the return of 2 local dads who were just taken by Trump's agents. This protest was led by the parents of other kids at the school attended by their kids. This was Grand Rapids, Michigan this weekend. It was a concert called Melt the Ice to raise money for immigrant families affected by ICE. They raised nearly $50,000 in Grand Rapids in this event, where 1,400 people turned out. The latest NBC News polling says a big majority of the country somewhat or strongly disapproves of Trump's actions on border security and immigration. It's 20 points underwater on that. 60% of the country is somewhat or strongly disapproving. An even bigger majority of the country says that they want ICE to be reformed or abolished. In that same NBC poll, Trump's approval rating is 22 points underwater. But even at approval levels that bad, that low, Americans' approval of ICE in that poll is even lower than their approval of Trump, which shows that as spectacularly unpopular and reviled as Trump is right now, his favorite issue, his pet issue of being cruel to immigrants is actually an anchor on his voting poll numbers. It's actually bringing him down further. It's starting to be a question as to how far down he can go. In the Yahoo YouGov poll, they've got Trump's approval 20 points underwater. Quinnipiac has a 19 points underwater. With independents in the Quinnipiac poll, that number drops way further. He's 27 points underwater with independents in the Quinnipiac poll. Hey, do you want to kind of bottom line this? This means if we were a country dying of thirst on a desert island right now and Donald Trump was the one selling water, we wouldn't buy it. We'd figure out some other way around it. I mean, this president's cruelty may be the point, but it is not working for him. He is reviled. He's more unpopular at this point in his presidency than any president in U.S. history, and it is not close. And it is his signature issues that are dragging him down further and further every week. And so you're now seeing him try to not talk about immigrants. Right? Now you're seeing him trying to change the subject, not just with new controversies, but with new offerings to the public. You see him trying to throw up all these little gimmicks to try to get something good to happen politically. He has no idea how to govern them, so they all just disappear as soon as they get floated. Right? A 10% cap on credit card interest. Remember that? Yeah, that it turns out is not happening. Rebate check for you from all the tariff money. Yeah, it turns out that is not happening either. Just like you're also not getting a rebate check from all the DOGE money. That's not happening either. 50-year mortgages. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Trump's going to decertify all the planes made in Canada. Okay, yeah, that's not happening. That's not happening either. ICE is going to be all over the Super Bowl. Remember when they announced that over and over again? Yeah, we just had the Super Bowl. That didn't happen. These gimmicks are not happening. Nothing he says substantively is worth paying attention to because there's so rarely any connection between anything he says and A, the truth, or B, even anything he's planning to actually do. Watch what he does, not what he says. Because what he is doing and what the American people are judging him for is brutalizing and killing people in the streets, sending his masked secret police storming into people's homes without a warrant, arresting and menacing peaceful protesters, arresting and prosecuting journalists, turning away priests and nuns at the door of the detention facility. He is now trying to build himself a huge new set of camps to hold tens of thousands of people indefinitely without trial. And what do the American people think about it? About what he's actually doing? Well, even ahead of the next big No Kings protest, which is going to happen on March 28th, the American people are making clear that they are vociferously against basically everything he's doing. And they are letting him know it every single day. And so, yes, happy President's Day. Indeed. I mean it. We got a lot to get to tonight, say the least.
Grainger knows that as a procurement coordinator and manufacturing planner, you can count on auto reordering to have the PPE you need on hand. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, goodgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, good ones, get it done.
Grand Canyon University. This is purpose-driven education. Visit gcu.edu.
Scotty was the closest thing to home that I ever had. You live your sex, free, dying.
This is from a new legal filing in federal court in Minnesota. Quote, Riley Kellermeyer, a 32-year-old biologist, was in South Minneapolis to observe and document Homeland Security activity. Kellermeyer saw an SUV that she believed to belong to an immigration agent. She decided to follow the car to report its whereabouts and activities to the community. When Kellermeyer got home, a Homeland Security vehicle was pulled up next to her house, suggesting that the agents were waiting for her. Afraid for her safety, she decided not to stop at her home and kept driving. The DHS vehicle began following her. She decided to drive to a public place for safety and went to a parking lot. The DHS vehicle pulled in front of her to block her path. An agent rolled down the driver's side window. The agent screamed at Kellermeyer to stop effing following them. And then Kellermeyer was arrested as she continued to observe them. There's another thing. Quote, Emily Phelps, a 44-year-old Edina resident, was observing DHS activity and followed leaned out of the SUV and photographed Phelps. Phelps started to drive away. The SUV then spun around and sped at Phelps' car as if the SUV was going to run into Phelps. Right before the SUV hit Phelps, it braked hard. The agent leaned out of the SUV front passenger window and yelled, "Emily, Emily, we're going to take you home." The agent then stated Phelps' home address. Phelps drove in the opposite direction. After driving about a block, Phelps noticed that the SUV was following her. Terrified, she went to a restaurant and waited several hours before finally joining. Those are two of dozens of sworn declarations by people observing or protesting ICE in Minnesota. MSNL has not independently verified these claims, but the ACLU collected more than 80 counts on this from people who say Trump special agents violated their First Amendment rights, systematically retaliating against people who were protesting against ICE or just going to document.
You're not asleep. You're not asleep. You need help. Yeah.
What?
Cause look, there's this cabinet out there. It's this long. Look. It's this long. Okay, this is the top of it. Okay. So that way, put this or use that for your desk. But we gotta go get it. And I can't lift it by myself.
All right.
I'm thinking about you.
No, I know, I'm going like that.
All they have to do is walk to this dumpster right down here, and we can bring it back. So just take a couple of minutes. If you don't want a desk, then fine, fuck it. We won't have to go get it.
I don't want.
I'm tired of you complaining.
I'm good for it, just fine with it.
What should we expect to see at tomorrow's hearing and coming days? What are you preparing for?
We will try to get it myself.
Well, I've been told from my attorneys that tomorrow's hearing is going to be pretty procedural. I will have the opportunity to.
I say here, Richie. No.
And, I think it's going to move fairly quickly.
It's a long time here.
This is the week of my birthday. And so instead of focusing on plans to celebrate with my family and friends, our focus is on getting through tomorrow. I know that there has been a lot of outcry over your arrest, the arrest of Don Lemon, who's obviously a very high-profile journalist. And there's a lot of concern. And one of the things we talked about when you were last here was whether or not that's translated materially into support for you in terms of weathering the legal costs, in terms of just handling the stress and the pressure of what this has meant. I wonder if that's changed at all over the last couple of weeks, or if you still feel like you're being sustained by people sympathizing with you and being angered by the way you're being targeted here. Well, Rachel, I want to send a huge thank you to you. Was it 2 weeks ago? There was an outpouring of support, and so my concern, honestly, remains with those of the people who are charged in the situation, who are now in the media just becoming, Don Lemon and others. There's other people who are affected by this, and you read stories of two other individuals who have been who have claims of their First Amendment right being impeded on, right? And so as a journalist, those were the stories that I was here in Minnesota, where I'm from, that I was attempting to document over the period of, I would say, 3 weeks very intensively since the fatal shooting of Renee Good. And now it does feel in a lot of ways like we are being muzzled. It is extremely difficult to continue reporting on something when you're listed as a defendant on the very story that you're reporting, right? And as a journalist, you would consider that to be an ethical dilemma. But there are only two people who can factually and objectively say what happened on that day, and now we're facing charges. Georgia Fort, you are known for your aggressive and even-handed reporting in Minneapolis, your comprehensive knowledge of the politics and sort of nooks and crannies of the Minneapolis and Minnesota news environment. The journalistic community misses you while you were having to contend with these other challenges, but we know you'll be back. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you so much. independent journalist George Fort. All right, we got more data. This was Concord, New Hampshire yesterday at the state capitol. We the people say no ice in Merrimack. No ice in Merrimack. Also, good people never built concentration camps. This is a protest over the weekend against a Trump prison camp that they're trying to build in Merrimack, about half hour south of the state capital in New Hampshire. Amid all the pushback they're seeing against this, the Trump administration sent over to the New Hampshire state government some reading material all about how actually nobody should oppose this. This is going to be great for the people of New Hampshire. What they sent over said, quote, the Department of Homeland Security plans to make a major economic investment in a new detention facility in Merrimack, New Hampshire. They didn't dot the I in Merrimack with a smiley face, but it kind of seemed like they were trying to. They brag about how the camp will, this prison camp will bring a ton of jobs to the state, to New Hampshire. They write about all the positive ripple effects this Trump prison camp will have on the, quote, Oklahoma economy. Wait a minute. This new prison camp in southern New Hampshire is going to be a boon for the great people of Oklahoma? Why does it say that? On the document they sent to the state government in New Hampshire to try to get them all psyched about this Trump prison camp, they not only placed Merrimack, New Hampshire somehow in Oklahoma, they also forgot to remove the comments, the internal comments ICE officials sent back and forth among themselves when they were putting this thing together. After people started pointing out what a mess this thing was, the White House apparently sent over to New Hampshire a revised copy of the same document, and it at least had some corrections. It had the right state name on it. That's nice. They also got rid of the internal comments from Homeland Security officials, but it was still filled with other mistakes. The document brags about how this Trump prison camp is going to bring millions of dollars to New Hampshire by way of state income taxes and state sales taxes, despite the fact that New Hampshire does not have either of those taxes. The document also references all the tax benefits that's going to flow to the county government in New Hampshire, despite the fact that the New Hampshire government doesn't work that way. It's not a county government, it's a town government. What are you talking about? But as much of an embarrassment as this is for the Trump administration, which apparently can't even spell New Hampshire, let alone lie to it with a straight face, the person for whom this has become a real political debacle turns out to be the New Hampshire governor, because she is a Republican. Her name is Kelly Ayotte, and she has botched this thing in about 30 different ways. When the ACLU published documents earlier this year showing that the Trump administration had talked to at least some officials in New Hampshire about this forthcoming prison camp, Governor Ayotte said, well, she didn't know anything about it. She blamed a state agency under her purview for failing to tell her about these discussions that ultimately led to the resignation of one of her cabinet officials. The governor said she had tried to get the Trump administration to answer questions about their plans for this prison camp in Merrimack, but they wouldn't answer her. That became a problem for Governor Ayotte when the head of ICE was asked about it at a Senate hearing a few days ago. He not only confirmed that the Merrimack Trump prison camp was a go, he said his agency had specifically spoken with Governor Ayotte about it. They talked to her personally. He said, quote, DHS has worked with Governor Ayotte. We've spoken to the governor about the facility. Governor Ayotte immediately denied that was true. She once again claimed that she had no idea what any of this was about. She said the Trump administration had sent her no details about their plans for Merrimack, which is why the White House promptly sent over those typo-riddled plans for the prison in her state and how great they'd be for Oklahoma. Meanwhile, as we've seen everywhere ICE wants to put one of these prison camps, the pressure against doing any such thing is growing and growing. Voters in New Hampshire, local residents continue to protest it. New Hampshire's entire congressional delegation, both the Senate and the House, is demanding answers about it. Even the governor next door in Massachusetts has called on Kelly Ayotte to oppose it. For her part, Governor Ayotte won't say whether she's for it or against it. She's just proclaiming to be profoundly confused, which is getting to be a political catastrophe for Kelly Ayotte as the people of New Hampshire stand up against this thing. More on that in a second. It's the headline from the Concord Monitor out of New Hampshire, quote, if the governor truly did not know about the ICE prison being built in her state, that New Hampshire has a governor who is not paying attention to critical developments. If she did know and chose not to engage publicly, that is even worse. Either way, the result is the same, a failure of leadership at a moment when clarity and accountability are essential. That very tough wording in an op-ed from New Hampshire State Rep Wendy Thomas, who represents the town of Merrimack, where ICE wants to turn a warehouse into a huge Trump prison camp. Joining us now is State Rep Wendy Thomas of New Hampshire. Representative Thomas, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me here.
So I should just tell you, my office, we reached out to Governor Ayotte in New Hampshire today. We haven't yet heard back. But can I just get your take, your read on what's going on here with your governor? She's refusing to say whether or not she wants this Trump prison camp or not in Merrimack. And she's professing to be basically confused and unaware that it's happening. It's very hard to follow from the outside.
Well, to me, that smacks of either incompetence or lying, as I wrote in the op-ed. There are all sorts of things that are happening simultaneously. One is that the owner of the warehouse turns out is a large financial donor to Haley Ayotte's campaigns. So we've got that problem. And the fact that she keeps saying that it's up to the towns. I'm going to let the towns decide. Well, our town has already decided we don't want this. We have a town council government, 7 members. They sent a letter down to Washington that said we don't want this in our town. And Ayotte is still dragging her heels on this. She's just, I saw what you were saying earlier about, the ICE facilities that are being closed down and being stopped. And that's not going to happen in our, the warehouse has been sold. We are going to have an ICE detention center in our town. And this is the same town that a couple weeks ago, the biggest discussion in our town was a rooster noise ordinance. We are just, we're not a big town. We're a little town. We're a town, we've got 30,000 people.
I know that you led a community meeting over Zoom on this yesterday with a couple of your fellow Democratic lawmakers, some other local leaders too from Merrimack. And from what I understand, you got a really big turnout for that, and your constituents have been pretty up in arms about this. What came out of that meeting? What are you hearing from your constituents? What other options people feel like they might have at this point?
Well, about 80 people attended that Zoom, which was pretty amazing for a Sunday night Zoom in New Hampshire. People are terrified. I'm hearing from constituents that people of color, that if ICE is in our town, they don't want to leave their homes. They're not going to send their kids to school. We're seeing what's happening in Minnesota. We're not blind. We can see the illegality, the violence, the disregard for human life, really. That's what it comes down to. So people are terrified. The other thing around this facility that they have purchased, now the deed has not been registered, so we don't know exactly who bought it yet. But the longer they take to file the deed, the more it looks like the government has gotten it. And trucks are going in with supplies and setting on equipment, so it's pretty clear what's happening. But there's a child care facility that's very close to this detention center. It's the Merrimack YMCA, and they just expanded their child care facility, so that's very close by. And a butter to the land that this facility will be located in is the Nashua Gun and Nashua Gun Club. So they use it to do target practice, and so you're gonna have target practice right next to this facility. This facility is also located on contaminated PFAS land, and that's something that is an issue.
Well, somewhere in America right now, there is a lawyer who has expertise in matters like these, who is wondering whether or not they should stick their hand up and try to volunteer to help the people of Merrimack. Representative Wendy Thomas, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate it. Stay in touch with us. All right. We'll be right back soon. All right, that's gonna do it for me tonight.
The Beatles split up, I thought, what do I do now? When we started Wings, it's about freedom. And we thought we'd finally arrived. Second time round.
Get your friends, family, the whole gang together for a legendary thing. 12 pieces of marinated grilled chicken, 3 sides, tortillas, and salsa. Flavor this great, serve some options. Let's get loco, El Pollo Loco.
Hey, folks, I'm coming to you live from College Station, Texas, where the annual Texas Council of Alpha Chapter holding their state convention. Of course, I place here at Texas A&M, Power Front Chapter, so the Grand Campus holding is, of course, leading this effort. And so you've got 600 brothers from around the state who are here earlier today. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, she spoke to the brothers here. Of course, the primary, March 3rd, she's facing the state of Tennessee, Rico. So those members taking place, and I actually, as you can see, my sticker, you can see my sticker right here. I actually voted, flew into Dallas, voted in Dallas County, and then drove down to College Station. I'm going to be, of course, speaking Sunday in Houston. So of course, I'll be all across this state this weekend. So a little bit later in the show, we're talking to the brother who's tasked with trying to organize and mobilize outfits all across Texas. But also beyond that, black voters to make sure they're casting their vote. In this state, African Americans have the largest number of black voters in any state in the country. In fact, when you look at minority folks in this state, 60% of Texas people of color, yet 60% of the folks that vote in Texas are white. So that's what's happening here. We'll talk about that. Now, one of the things that we have been looking at and dealing with is what we have laid out, and that is the absolute targeting of African Americans. The effort by Donald Trump and Maxine to defund Black America. So what they have been doing is attacking colleges and universities, forcing them to make massive changes to a variety of things. Again, I'm here in conversation. My alma mater, Texas University, being led by this right-wing governor in Texas, Greg Abbott, this country's right-wing governor, Dan Patrick. They have been forcing the border region to do away with race and gender. University of Texas took some action today, saying that they want to keep students from having to take what they call controversial classes. That makes no sense whatsoever. But what we're seeing here, some 45, 50 institutions are being cut. We're talking about places where they have programming that's about reaching out and increasing the number of African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans in college and universities. Donald Trump's anti-black, anti-DEI, anti-minority administration is hitting these folks hard. So now all of a sudden, these universities are scared to death. They really are cutting ties with a variety of organizations. The Washington Post had a story. Y'all have control and pull that story up. The Washington Post had a story laying out these cuts. In California, they literally are cutting ties with a chapter of the Lynx. The Lynx president was quoted saying, "We don't know anything about this," but the one that also I saw a tweet before I came live, Clemson is cutting ties with a number of conferences. In fact, I remember I spoke in Clemson, and they have actually a conference for men of color. More than likely, that conference goes out the window. So people have to understand what they're seeing is a massive attack by Donald Trump and MAGA against efforts to recruit and retain African Americans. So what have I said they're trying to do by defunding Black America? They're trying to cut off access to college and universities. They're trying to cut off access to contracts. They're cutting off access to grants and things along those lines. And so there is a wholesale assault on Black America taking place as we speak. And folks need to wake up and understand what's going on. Joining me right now on the show
Just one side note.
is the president of the PhD project
glad to have you here on all of our culture on the Black Star Network. This is it's devastating again. They talk about Texas A&M. That was a conference where they were sending some folks, and the whole goal of the conference is to actually recruit minority PhD candidates. Well, Greg Abbott finds out, he orders the president and says to the president, that president has since resigned, if you do not cancel the travel to this, I'm going to fire you. And so what you have right now, Alfonso, are university administrators who are scared to death because what Donald Trump is doing is saying, I'm going to take away your federal funding, your research grant, if you support any of these programming. And so talk about how these ties being cut, how is it affecting your organization, the PhD project?
Sure, thank you for having me, Roland, and it's affecting us significantly. We have been a tremendous asset to the academic community by providing access for talented individuals that normally wouldn't necessarily know about how they could get engaged and become PhDs, which then they impact the students that come through. The students of all color benefit from having diverse faculty that they're interacting with. And so what has happened for us specifically is, we had over 200 universities that partnered with us last year prior to the changes that the administration has put in place. And now, it's less than 100 that have partnered with us in that same capacity. Some of them have been forced. Some of them were part of that list of 45 that you referenced earlier, and others because of some of the things and the information that they are having to abide by within their state that's caused some of those issues too. So we're wrapping up, we're working on other ways to be able to still provide access to young people through faculty who have a diverse level of understanding, diverse mix of individuals so that they can still impact our country so that we can be better and continue to grow. But it's been very challenging for us from a financial standpoint. A significant financial hit has come our way as a result of this, and we are working through to fight through so that we can continue to provide opportunities.
So for folks who are unaware, so what exactly was the PhD project doing for these students? Were you funding their travel? What was actually happening? And first of all, folks, how long have y'all been around?
Sure. So the PhD project has been around since 1994. And what we have done is been able to create a community that includes individuals that are already PhDs mentoring PhD students. PhD students learning and growing and understanding how to be better researchers, how to be better teachers as a part of the process, and how to create that community so that they have a positive impact on students that come through both undergraduate and graduate level programs in business schools. And what we do is provide a forum for those students to get together with those faculty members. We provide access to resources that can help them. One of the challenges and one of the misconceptions that was out there was that we were giving funding to students that fit certain ethnic groups, but not to others. Well, we don't provide funding. We just provide access to information and partnerships that they can then seek opportunities through those. But the influence of the organization has been great in the 30 plus years that we've been around. And that's been what has been a challenge for those who feel like we're helping people who we have traditionally helped and don't think that's necessary.
So here's the question, that is, as a result of this, is this going to, in your estimation, lead to a drop in the number of minority PhD candidates, or you're working to try to find other ways to keep them involved? Because, and this is the thing I keep trying to explain to people, that what this is literally cutting off access to not higher education, but the upper echelon of higher education. So the trickle down impact of hurting white students. Yet when you look at the numbers, it's not even remotely close to seeing how many white students are getting PhDs on an annual basis that far exceed the combination of Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American.
It is absolutely correct. So yes, the numbers will decline, and here's the impact that makes. So there are programs that have been funding research. There are institutions that have been funding research and research that helps people understand how individuals lead, research that helps people understand how businesses are built in different economies and different markets, and those funds are being